The morning sun broke over the hills, spilling pale light across the narrow village. Birds sang in the hedgerows, bells tolled faintly from the distant chapel. But for Alara the day felt hollow, a drumbeat echoing toward dread. The house bustled with activity, maids rushed about with ribbons, the cook barked orders in the kitchen, her stepmother hummed with false cheer. Alara sat stiff in her chamber, her slender hands trembling in her lap. Her mother's old comb, worn ivory with fading carvings, lay forgotten on the dressing table. She should have felt joy. Brides were supposed to glow with hope. Instead, a knot of cold fear twisted in her stomach. It had all begun so quickly. Months ago, her father had returned from a trading journey with proud news. She was to wed the son of Lord Ghanian, the wealthiest man in the province. A fine match, her father had declared. A future secured. No one asked what Alara wanted. She had seen her betrothed only twice. Tall and handsome at first glance, but with sharp, mocking eyes that lingered too long. Rumors whispered through the maids that Ghanian was cruel, given to harsh words and harsher hands. Servants had been dismissed for the smallest faults, animals beaten in drunken rages. Alara begged her father to reconsider, to wait. He refused. "You will wed him," he said. "Our fortunes depend on it." Her stepmother only smiled thinly. There was no escape. Now the hour had come. The heavy wedding gown of ivory silk hung on its stand, embroidered with the finest gold thread. A gift from the Ghanian family, its expense a reminder of her duty. When the maids laced the corset tight around her ribs, she could barely breathe. Her reflection in the mirror was pale, her green eyes too wide, her lips bloodless. At the chapel, villagers had gathered already, chattering excitedly. Nobles arrived on sleek horses. The Ghanian men stood in dark finery, cold and proud. The groom awaited her, face unreadable but for the flicker of hunger in his gaze. When her father led her forward, her steps faltered. But the grip on her arm tightened. "Do not shame us," he hissed softly. "Smile." She tried. Her lips would not move. Then as the ceremony began, Ghanian leaned close. His breath was sour with wine. "After tonight," he whispered, "you'll learn your place." Something inside Alara snapped. Fear turned to resolve. No, she would not belong to him. Not at any cost. In a sudden motion, she tore away from her father's grasp. Gasps echoed through the chapel. "I will not marry him," she cried, voice trembling but clear. "I will not." Chaos erupted. Her father shouted in fury, the priest stammered, guests murmured in outrage. Before she could flee, rough hands seized her, her uncles, the groom's cousins. "Bring her," Lord Ghanian commanded coldly. "Such shame cannot be allowed." They dragged her from the chapel. No one helped. No one stopped them. Out of sight of the crowd, the Ghanian men hurled her to the ground. "You dare humiliate us?" Ghanian snarled. "You'll regret this, girl." Alara struggled, but there were too many. They bound her wrists, her mouth. Her wedding gown trailed behind her like a shroud as they hauled her toward the dark woods beyond the fields. No one followed. No alarm was raised. Her own father watched in grim silence. In a clearing beneath an old willow, the Ghanian men began to dig. The earth was cold and damp. Birds fled the branches above. Ghanian crouched beside her, sneering. "Consider this mercy," he said. "Better no bride than a disobedient one." Her muffled screams filled the air. Her struggles grew frantic. But the pit was finished. They threw her in, gown and all, then began to shovel earth over her. Soil fell across her face, her hands. Darkness closed in. The last thing she heard was Ghanian's voice. "An accident," he said. She ran, fell, poor girl. That is the tale we'll tell. Then there was only earth. Cold, suffocating earth. Darkness pressed in from every side. Alara's lungs burned. The cold of the earth wrapped around her like iron chains. Her heart pounded wildly, though her body felt leaden beneath the crushing weight of soil. Panic flared first. Her mind screamed, you're buried alive." Her mouth was filled with grit. Each attempt to gasp brought in more dirt, choking her throat. Her limbs flailed instinctively, hands clawing upward, but the heavy earth resisted, pressing tighter with each frantic movement. Her arms strained and shook. Her fingernails tore against stone and root. The scent of raw earth filled her nose, sharp and bitter. Her wedding gown tangled around her legs, the silk now sodden and dragging her downward. Threads that once shimmered in the sun now coiled like cold worms. No. Her thoughts scattered like dry leaves. Fear spiraled in her chest. No light, no breath. Was this death? Memories surged, her mother's soft hands braiding her hair as a child, her father's once laughing eyes, long before ambition had hardened them, a summer meadow full of yellow flowers, the kindness of an old tutor, all slipping away like water through her fingers. Then came rage. Images of Keston's sneer, the cold eyes of her father, the smug faces of her captors, their boots crushing the hem of her gown, their jeers as they tossed her into the pit, the sound of shovels striking earth, sealing her fate. No, not like this. Not beneath the dirt while they walk free. A wild, desperate fury rose within her. She arched her back, pushing against the weight. Her fingers dug upward again, nails splitting. Every movement felt impossible, yet she refused to stop. Her breath came in ragged bursts. Please, help. Far above, unseen by her blinded eyes, the old willow tree stood watch. Its massive roots stretched deep into the earth. The tree was ancient, older than the village, older than the men who had buried her. It had drunk in countless seasons of sun and rain. And within its heart pulsed an old magic, one born of the land itself. The roots stirred. Slowly, threads of awareness coiled through the earth, brushing against Alara's trembling form. Not human. Not of words or thought, but the tree knew pain. The tree knew loss. And here beneath its boughs, an injustice had seeped into the soil. The roots reached down, curling through the loam toward her broken body. Faint warmth brushed against her shoulder. Her arm. Her tangled hair. Alara's mind flickered. What is this? Memories of her grandmother's stories surfaced. Whispers of the old ways, of the forest's ancient life. Of trees that listened. Of earth that remembered. Was it true? A thin thread of calm wrapped around her panic. Her clawing slowed, not from defeat but from something deeper. A strange knowing stirred in her heart. I do not want to die, she thought fiercely, the words echoing in her chest. I will not die here, not beneath their lies. A pulse of energy rippled through the willow's roots. The earth shifted subtly. Alara's hand broke through a thinner layer of soil. Air, a faint breathless pocket, touched her scraped fingers. She gasped, pulling in a ragged, trembling breath. Grit filled her throat, but still, breath. Her strength was fading. Her limbs shook violently, exhaustion sinking into her bones. Her heart hammered unevenly. And yet her mind remained clear. Rage burned brighter than fear now. They think me gone. They will laugh and feast, but I will not grant them peace. Tears welled in her closed eyes, cutting tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. Not tears of despair, but of promise. I swear, if I cannot live, then I will haunt them. If I cannot speak, then let the earth cry out for me. If I cannot rise, then let them see what they have done. The old magic listened. The willow's roots tightened gently around the frayed threads of her gown. The fabric shimmered faintly, almost imperceptibly, in the dark soil. A current of energy, old as stone and river, moved through root and thread. It wrapped through the bodice, through the long trailing sleeves, through the tattered train. The cloth drank it in, ancient life mingling with the last fierce breath of a doomed bride. Alara's arms dropped, too weak to claw further. Her thoughts slowed. Her pulse thudded faintly. But before her mind fell into shadow, one last thought sang through her soul. Let them see me. Let them know. I was not willing. I was not silent. I was not broken. The roots coiled softly. And the gown began to stir. Far above the buried bride, the first pale light of dawn brushed the tops of the willow tree's drooping branches. The village still slept, unaware of the earth's restless stirring beneath their feet. The grave at the willow's roots remained untouched by mortal hand. No shovel marked the surface, no flowers graced the site. Only a faint tremor in the soil hinted at what lay below. The dress. Long forgotten, crafted by an old seamstress whose name had faded from memory, the gown had once been woven with more than mere thread. The lace patterns were symbols from a time before the village walls stood, a time when artisans whispered charms into their work, songs of protection, of love, of truth. The bodice, shaped with care, had drawn upon old rites. The train, heavy with embroidered sigils, had been meant to bless a happy union. But no joy had accompanied this wedding. Instead, betrayal had soaked the silk. Rage and sorrow had seeped into the weave. And in the cold silence of the grave, the gown had listened. It had drunk in Alara's final breath, her vow of vengeance, her burning will. The willow's roots had touched the hem, awakening what still slumbered in the cloth. A shimmer passed along the ruined lace. Faint at first, like the ripple of a breeze, then stronger. The threads tightened, pulling taut against the soil. A soft hum filled the earth, unheard by human ear but echoing through the old wood of the willow. The gown began to move. Slowly, inch by inch, the train shifted, shedding clumps of dirt. The sleeves lifted, trembling. The bodice swelled as if filled by an invisible form. Threads of magic wound tighter with each heartbeat of the earth. Above ground, a crow perched on a high branch tilted its head, sensing the unseen force below. It cawed sharply, once, twice, then took flight, wings beating against the dawn. Below, the gown rose. No human breath filled its shape. No body gave it weight. But the threads themselves seemed alive, responding not only to ancient magic, but to Alara's fierce promise. Up through the soil it moved. First the sleeves, stretching toward the surface. Then the bodice, gathering strength. The neckline shimmered faintly with an otherworldly glow, soft and cold. The train slithered upward, pulling loose from the roots that had protected it. Moments stretched. The earth shifted again, crumbling. A pale white sleeve broke through the surface, followed by a slender fold of fabric. Bit by bit, the gown emerged, soiled, torn in places, but shining with strange life. And then, fully free. The dress stood in the clearing, empty and upright. The wind stilled. The willow branches hung silent as if holding their breath. No human hand moved the fabric, yet the gown swayed gently as though shaped by an unseen presence. The lace sleeves lifted and dropped, the bodice rising and falling in a rhythm that mimicked breath. A thread of silver light traced the embroidery. Symbols long lost now gleamed faintly beneath layers of dirt. The old seamstress's charms awakened fully, bound now to Alara's vow. The gown was no longer a garment. It was a vessel for truth, for fury, for the voice of the wronged. With a sound like the soft rustle of leaves, the dress began to drift forward, no feet beneath it, yet gliding smoothly over root and earth. The empty sleeves brushed aside low branches. The train whispered against the ground. Toward the village it moved. The path beneath the willow arched, forming a natural tunnel. Through this passage the gown floated, light gleaming faintly now with each motion. Birds watched from the trees, silent. A fox, peering from a burrow, pressed low to the ground, sensing the shift in the air. Magic was awake. And the gown was no longer bound to the grave. It carried with it the sorrow of the buried bride. The vow of vengeance. The truth that had been buried with her. Each stitch, each thread now pulsed with purpose. Toward the place of betrayal it moved. Toward the village square. Toward the ones who thought her silenced. And in the faint morning light, the first villagers would soon wake, to find the dress, alone, walking the earth. The moon hung low and full, its pale glow weaving long shadows between the towering trunks of the forest. The path that wound through the woods toward the village had grown still, the usual chorus of night creatures falling eerily silent. Only the faint rustle of fabric stirred the hush, a soft, deliberate sound that seemed to come from nowhere. Through the dense trees drifted the wedding gown. It moved with an unnatural grace as if borne on an unseen current. The empty sleeves swayed lightly with each motion. The long, embroidered train whispered against leaves and roots. Though no feet guided its path, the dress glided forward, steady and sure. A fox darted across the trail, pausing to glance back at the shifting pale figure. It let out a nervous yip and vanished into the undergrowth. The dress drifted on. A pair of young woodcutters, returning late from the far edge of the forest, caught sight of it first. From the shadows they watched, wide-eyed and frozen. The tall white gown shimmered faintly in the moonlight, its form upright, though no person filled it. Slowly it passed, the embroidered train trailing behind, untouched by the damp earth. One of the men gasped. "Ghost?" he whispered. His voice trembled. Without waiting, they turned and fled down the path, feet pounding the dirt, too terrified to look back. By the time they reached the village outskirts, breathless and pale, their tales spilled from their lips to the ears of any who would listen. A ghost bride walked the woods. The cursed dress of the doomed girl had risen from the grave. Word spread fast. Doors were bolted. Candles snuffed. Children pulled from windows. The moon shone cold above the rooftops as whispers passed from house to house. Still the dress moved on. Along the worn path, beneath the twisted boughs, it glided toward the edge of the trees. A farmer driving his cart halted at the sight, his mule braying in panic. The man could only gape as the gown floated past him, untouched by wind, its fabric unstirred by any human presence. It left no footprints in the dust. More villagers glimpsed it from behind shutters. A tanner crossing the bridge caught a flash of white beneath the trees and dropped his lantern, fleeing toward the town square. No matter how fast the tale traveled, it seemed the dress traveled faster, an unstoppable presence, weaving its way closer to the heart of the village. In the market lane, Old Madame Kira pressed trembling fingers to her mouth as she peered from her window. "The doomed one walks," she murmured to her husband. Her spirit will not rest." No one spoke openly of the truth, not of the forced marriage, not of the cruel family that had buried Alara beneath the willow. But all knew. All had looked away. And now, under the silver gaze of the moon, it seemed the past had returned. The groom's family too heard the whispers. In their grand house atop the hill, lamps burned late into the night. Servants reported strange sightings. White lace seen at the garden wall, a flicker of fabric at the window. The young groom, once so cruel, now pale with fear, ordered every entrance locked. But locks meant little to a dress without form. By midnight the gown had crossed the final ridge. It hovered at the edge of the village green, moonlight spilling across its embroidered bodice, the lace gleaming faintly. No breath stirred the air, no footstep touched the ground. Yet it stood, upright, regal, terrible in its beauty. A group of young men, emboldened by drink, dared approach. They laughed nervously, swords and cudgels in hand. "It's just cloth," one jeered. "A trick, nothing more." But as they neared, the sleeves lifted slowly as though in silent warning. The air grew thick, cold. A gust of unseen wind swept past, snuffing their torches. The ground beneath them trembled faintly, too faint for the eye, but enough that each man felt it in his bones. The laughter faded. The first to break was the tallest. He turned with a shout, fleeing into the night. The others followed, weapons abandoned. By dawn, none dared leave their homes. And the dress remained, standing alone in the village square, empty, yet alive. The sun rose pale and sickly over the village, its weak light struggling to chase away the heavy chill that had settled overnight. The tale of the walking dress had spread to every ear. Farmers spoke of it in hushed tones at dawn. Market stalls opened late. Children were kept indoors. The village square remained empty. No one dared approach the place where the empty gown still stood, unmoving, like a sentinel of some ancient wrath. In the grand house on the hill, the groom, Harlan, son of the wealthiest merchant, paced restlessly. His face was pale, drawn. Gone was the swagger of a proud, entitled man. Gone were the sneers, the mocking smiles. Instead, his eyes darted to every shadow, his ears twitched at every sound. He had heard the whispers, a ghost bride, a cursed gown, a spirit rising from the willow grave. And though he scoffed before his friends and father, in private, dread gnawed at him. For he knew the truth that the village only suspected. Alara had not died by accident. It had been his rage, his command that sealed her fate. The burial beneath the old tree had been deliberate. His hands were clean only by the cowardice of words, by lies told through his family's power. Now the lies crumbled. He ordered the servants to bolt every door, shutter every window. He refused to leave the estate. Guards were stationed about the grounds, torches kept burning all night. But still the fear clung to him, cold and relentless. On the third night after the first sighting, the storm came. A heavy wind lashed the trees. Rain lashed the roofs. Thunder growled over the hills. Harlan sat in his chamber, fire blazing in the hearth, a goblet of wine untouched in his trembling hand. He had dismissed his servants. Alone, he stared into the flames, trying to convince himself the stories were foolishness, mere superstition. He nearly believed it until a cold draft swept through the room, snuffing several candles. His breath caught. Then, the tap. Soft, deliberate, at the window. Heart hammering, he rose, each step slow and stiff, as if moving through water. The wind howled outside, but the sound was clearer now, fingers or something like them brushing the glass. He reached the window. There it stood. The gown. Pressed against the pane, the fine lace and satin gleamed white in the storm's gloom. The sleeves were raised as if reaching toward him. The bodice was empty, no figure within, yet it seemed to breathe, to pulse faintly with some hidden life. Harlan stumbled back, gasping. The goblet crashed to the floor. "No," he rasped. "No, this can't be." But the gown did not vanish. It remained, unmoving, an unrelenting presence. With a strangled cry, Harlan fled the room, bolting through the halls. He called for his guards, but none came. The house seemed empty, the silence thick and wrong. He burst through the front door into the storm, not caring for the rain, not caring for the mud that swallowed his boots. He ran. Down the hill. Through the winding lanes. Toward the old shrine near the edge of town, where once he had laughed at the village's old ways. Behind him, though unseen, the dress followed. It was not swift, but it did not need to be. Its presence was enough. Wherever Harlan fled, the whispers followed him. faces turned away, doors slammed shut. His friends would no longer meet his gaze. His father's business partners withdrew in cold silence. And then came the accidents. A beam from his family's warehouse collapsed one morning, narrowly missing Harlan as he inspected goods. A horse panicked in the square, throwing him violently to the ground. Mirrors cracked in his home without cause. The well water turned sour, sickening those who drank it. At first he blamed servants, blamed chance. But in his heart, the truth festered. Alara. Her name haunted his sleep, her face, pale, terrified beneath her veil, rose in every shadow. And the dress, always the dress. Wherever he turned, he saw flashes of white, caught at the edge of vision. Soon none dared approach him. His family's wealth could not buy peace. His father raged in vain, helpless to shield his son from a vengeance no coin could sway. By the seventh night Harlan was a wreck. Haggard, unshaven, eyes ringed with sleepless fear. He spoke to empty rooms, begged unseen forces for forgiveness. But the storm within the village only grew. For now too many whispered the truth. An old midwife spoke openly of the bruises she had seen on Alara before the wedding. A servant girl confessed that the groom's family had lied, that the burial beneath the willow had been no accident. And the elders, once silent, began to murmur of justice long denied. Yet the dress needed no counsel. It needed no law. It would follow and it would not stop. And deep down Harlan knew, the crimes he had hidden were now laid bare, not by courts, not by men, but by the will of the one he had wronged. And by dawn he would find there was nowhere left to run. By the 8th day since the dress had first been seen, the entire village was caught in the grip of feverish dread. It wasn't only Harlan who could not sleep. Everyone spoke in whispers, glancing over shoulders, locking doors at night. The elders convened, but no counsel brought relief. For the truth was heavier than the lies that had masked it for so long, and the villagers could feel it in the very air. At the estate of Alara's family, the unease was suffocating. Lady Verena, Alara's mother, sat rigid in the drawing room, her trembling hands clasped tight in her lap. Her husband, Lord Brunnick, paced furiously, sweat glistening on his brow despite the chill of the morning. Their other children, Alara's brothers and sisters, huddled near the hearth, silent and pale. "They will never prove it," Brunnick growled for the 10th time that hour. "No one can tie us to that nonsense." But even he could not keep the fear from his voice. For in the deepest hours of the night, when the servants had long fled and the household was locked down, the dress had come. It had not knocked or scratched. It had simply appeared, in the center of the great hall, luminous in the moonlight that filtered through the high windows. Empty yet alive. Its lace whispered against the stone floor, though no breeze stirred. Its skirt shifted as though unseen feet moved beneath. The house awoke to screams. By dawn, not one in the household doubted what they had seen. Lord Brunnick had ordered the place searched from cellar to tower. No intruder was found. And yet, by midday one of the serving maids claimed the gown had appeared again, in the bedchamber once used by Alara. Lady Verena refused to enter that room now. Her children refused to sleep alone. Fear crawled through every wall, seeping into every breath. And still they denied. It was grief, Lady Verena said through clenched teeth. Hysteria. But no one believed her, not even herself. The villagers, meanwhile, had grown bolder. The elders had sent a delegation to the estate demanding answers. When Brunnick refused to meet them, the whispers only grew louder. Women gathered in the market square, speaking of Alara, of her bruises, of her fear before the wedding day. Men recalled the hurried, secretive burial, the strange hush that followed. Now there was more than talk of ghosts, there was talk of justice. By the 10th night the gown returned once more. This time, it stood in the very dining hall before the entire family. They had gathered for supper, trying to maintain a facade of normal life. The roast lay untouched, wine glistened in goblets, but none could eat. The room was too cold, the fire too dim. Then, without sound or herald, the dress was simply there. At the head of the table. No figure filled it. No shadow announced its coming. Yet its presence was undeniable. The air thickened, a low hum seeming to fill the chamber, felt more than heard. Lady Verena fainted. Brunnick leapt to his feet, roaring for the guards. But they would not come. The household had emptied, servants gone, doors left ajar in their haste. Only the family remained, trapped with their guilt. For long moments no one spoke. The gown did not move, but its stillness was its own accusation. Then Alara's youngest sister, barely 12, broke the silence. "I heard them," she whispered. "The night before. Father and Harlan, in the study. They said, said if she would not wed, she would not live to shame us. Brainic's face drained of color. Silence, he barked, but the words rang hollow. The child wept. The other siblings stared at the floor. One by one, the truth began to seep forth, small confessions murmured through fear. How they had locked Alara in her chamber. How Bronick and Harlan's father had plotted to solve the problem. How the burial had been ordered as a cover for their shame. And above all, how none had dared speak since, bound by terror of their own making. As the truths poured forth, the dress shimmered faintly, as if listening, as if urging the words free. The temperature in the room rose. Lady Verena, revived, sobbed openly now, unable to look upon the empty gown. We thought it would fade, Bronick choked, with time. We thought the village would forget. But the village had not forgotten. The forest had not forgotten. And clearly, Alara had not forgotten. By dawn, the elders returned, this time not as a delegation, but with the full strength of the village behind them. No one barred their way. They entered the great hall to find the family broken, tear-streaked, trembling, too cowed even to speak. And there, in the center of the hall, the gown stood still. It had waited. The elders heard the confessions themselves. They listened as the youngest sister repeated her words. They took in the state of the household, its terror, its shame. And as the first light of morning crept through the stained glass, the eldest of the council turned to the dress and spoke. "We see you," she said softly. "We know the truth now. And justice will be done." The gown seemed to shimmer once more as if in acknowledgement. The house of Bronick had fallen. And the village would soon know it. Morning dawned gray and cold over the village, but by the time the sun cleared the hills, the streets were already full. News of what had happened at the Bronick estate traveled faster than any rider. Whispers ran from door to door, shop to market, until the entire town knew. The gown had returned, not in secret but openly, before the council, before the family, before the very eyes of those who had once called Alara a bride. Now the villagers gathered in the square, their faces pale, eyes flickering toward the road that led to the Bronick lands. No one knew what might happen next. Some feared the curse would spill into the town. Others, especially the women, felt a dark satisfaction beneath their fear, as if justice, long denied, had finally stirred. In the midst of the crowd, the council elders convened in haste beneath the ancient oak that shaded the square. They pored over scrolls, dusty ledgers, and faded records from the town's early days, documents long kept in the archives and rarely touched. "We must understand this thing," said Elder Renar grimly. "It is no simple haunting. The gown moves with will, not madness." "It is an enchantment," murmured Elder Mira, her lined face drawn tight. "An old, perhaps older than we know." A quiet voice spoke from the edge of the group. "There was a seamstress once, long ago." The elders turned. It was old Mari, the herb woman, who remembered things others forgot. "She lived on the edge of the forest," Mari continued, her voice thin but sure. "A maker of wedding garments, sought by brides across the land. Her stitches held more than thread, she wove wishes into her cloth. Hopes, protections." Renar frowned. "And this gown?" Mari nodded. "It was hers. Passed through generations. Worn only by those of Bronick blood." The elders exchanged grave looks. If the dress carried old magic, if Alara's death had awakened it. "Justice is moving," Mira whispered. "And no man may halt it." By midday the fear in the town had deepened. The people no longer gathered out of curiosity, they were afraid. Shops remained shuttered, work unfinished. No carts rumbled down the streets. Even the children, sensing the heaviness in the air, stayed silent. Near the tavern, a cluster of farmers spoke in low voices. "I saw it myself," one muttered. "Last night. The gown, drifting down the road." "Aye," another replied. "My cousin swore it stopped before his door. Stood there, like it listened." "It's her, I tell you," whispered a third. "Alara's spirit walks in that cloth." Not all were so convinced. In the shadow of the church, Master Dolan, once a staunch ally of the Branicks, snorted with scorn. Foolish tales. A trick of light and wind. But even he would not walk alone after dark. By the third hour of the afternoon the council bell rang, 3 slow peals. A gathering was called. The entire town answered. Under the oak the elders stood before the restless crowd. Faces, young, old, rich, poor, all turned to them waiting. Elder Renar raised a hand. "We have consulted the old records. We have heard witness from those of the Bronick house. The truth is plain, a wrong was done and the gown now moves with purpose." A low murmur rippled through the villagers. Renar continued, voice steady. It is not a curse that haunts us, it is justice. No sword nor fire will stop it. He looked to Mari, who stepped forward. The magic in that gown is old, rooted in truth. It will not rest until the crime is faced and the debt repaid. A voice called out from the crowd, Phelan, a young weaver. What can we do? Are we safe? Mira answered gently. Fear will only feed it. Let the truth be heard. Let the guilty stand. Then, the spirit may rest. And so the town, frightened but resolute, waited. All eyes turned again toward the Bronick estate. That night few slept. And none would forget what came after. Night cloaked the village in heavy stillness. Clouds veiled the moon, casting the streets in near darkness. Yet the people stirred, rising from beds, lighting lanterns, murmuring to one another in hushed voices. It was as if an unseen hand had beckoned them forth. No summons had been called, yet one by one families filed into the town square. No laughter, no chatter, only the solemn tread of feet on cobblestones. Word spread quickly through the gathering. The gown had been seen again. It had left the Bronick estate and now moved through the village streets, slowly, deliberately, as if guided by a will both ancient and resolute. The elders were already beneath the old oak, grim-faced, staffs in hand. No declarations were needed. The villagers knew, this was the hour. Justice had come. A breathless messenger arrived, one of the younger lads. It comes, down the north road. Alone. Lanterns were lifted. Eyes strained in the gloom. And then, there. A shimmer of white through the shadows. The wedding gown moved as though worn, but no body filled its folds. The lace swayed gently, the hem gliding above the ground. Its veil shimmered faintly, touched by unseen light. Silent, relentless, it drifted into the square. No one dared speak. The gown halted before the elders, its empty sleeves falling at its sides. A shudder rippled through the crowd. From the edge of the square, cries rose, Alaric, the groom, stumbling forward. His fine clothes were torn, his face pale and streaked with sweat. Behind him came members of the Bronick household, the patriarch, Alaric's mother, Alara's own cousins, each drawn by a force they could not resist. No more. Alaric sobbed, falling to his knees before the dress. No more, I beg you. He clawed at the earth, trembling. It was not my will, it was madness. Rage. I did not mean. The dress stood unmoving. A sudden gust stirred the air, though no wind had come from the sky. The lantern flames flickered. Some villagers gasped, others swore they heard a soft, sorrowful sigh echo through the square. Alaric's father fell to his knees beside him. We hid the truth, he cried. We claimed an accident, but it was no accident. We buried her, alive, to silence her shame, to protect our name. Gasps rose from the crowd. Even those who had suspected dark deeds were shaken by the open confession. Alara's cousins wept openly. One, barely able to speak, whispered, We sealed the grave, we watched her struggle, we turned away. The gown stirred. A faint shimmer of silver laced through the fabric. The lace seemed to breathe and the hem glowed faintly, as though touched by the spirit of the wronged bride. Elder Mira stepped forward, voice clear. The spirit is here. Alara hears. Speak your full truth. Alaric sobbed. I forced her into marriage. When she fled, my fury blinded me. Oh gods. Words failed him. But the gown seemed to acknowledge the confessions. Slowly the veil lifted as though on an invisible breeze. From the crowd, old Mari whispered, She listens. The villagers stood in awed silence. Some wept, some crossed themselves. Many simply stared, their hearts heavy with the weight of the moment. Finally, Elder Renar raised his staff. Let all here bear witness. The crime is spoken. The truth is laid bare. The debt must be answered. The gown, as if in agreement, shimmered once more. Then it began to drift backward, away from the square toward the willow grove beyond the town. The people parted in reverent silence, watching the empty dress move, its path clear. No one would forget this night. No one would ever again doubt the power of truth, or the strength of the spirit wronged. Dawn broke over the village with a softness rarely seen. Golden light touched the edges of rooftops and filtered gently through the willow grove. A hush had fallen over the people, not from fear now, but from reverence. The events of the night still clung to them, etched deep in their hearts and minds. Word spread quickly, the gown had returned to the willow. By the time the sun had fully risen, a small group had gathered at the edge of the grove. No one dared step too close, not out of dread but out of respect. The place had changed. Where once the earth had seemed cold and stained with sorrow, now there was a quiet warmth beneath the great tree's branches. The gown lay beneath the willow, its folds neatly arranged as if placed by unseen hands. The lace shimmered faintly in the morning light. No longer did it drift or glow with restless energy. Instead it rested, still, peaceful, as if the spirit within had finally found its place. Elder Mira approached first, staff in hand, her old bones creaking. She stopped a respectful distance away and bowed her head. "Peace, child," she whispered. "May you know no more suffering." Beside her, Elder Renar spoke softly to the watching villagers. "The wrong was great, but the truth is now known. Justice walks with us again. Let us honor her spirit, and may her rest bring peace to this land." A soft breeze stirred the willow's branches, causing leaves to fall like gentle rain. Many of the villagers wept quietly, some for sorrow, some for relief. For years, unease had lingered among them, an unspoken sense that something dark lay hidden. Now that weight had lifted. Alara's old nurse, her hands trembling, stepped forward. Tears streamed down her face. "You were loved, child," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You will not be forgotten." Others followed. Friends, neighbors, even those who had once doubted or turned away. Flowers were laid near the gown. Small tokens of remembrance were left at the roots of the willow. No shrine was built, for none wished to disturb the grove. The place itself had become sacred. As the sun climbed higher, the villagers quietly returned to their homes. The gown remained beneath the willow, untouched. It was said that, in the days that followed, no wind or rain would move it. And on nights when the moon shone bright, a faint, contented glow would sometimes be seen from the grove, no longer restless but at peace. In time, the tale of Alara became more than a story of sorrow. It became a reminder to all that no cruelty could remain hidden and no voice, however silenced, would go unheard forever. The willow stood tall, its branches sheltering the gown. The forest whispered softly around it. And beneath the earth, Alara's spirit, finally free of pain and injustice, could rest at last. Seasons turned and years passed. The village slowly returned to its rhythms, but one thing had changed forever. The story of the wedding dress that walked lived on in every heart. No one forgot the sight of the gown gliding through the night, the weight of guilt it had revealed, nor the peace it had finally found beneath the old willow. The willow itself flourished. Its branches grew longer, fuller, leaves shimmering in the sunlight and sighing softly in the wind. It stood taller than any other tree in the grove now, a quiet sentinel watching over the resting place of the gown. Some said its roots had been touched by magic, that Alara's spirit had blessed the tree. No one dared to cut a branch or carve into its bark. It had become a place of reverence. Children were raised on the tale. Mothers would hush their little ones, telling them of the young bride wronged and the power that rose to right it. Fathers would remind their sons that no deed, good or evil, was truly buried. The earth remembered. The wind carried truth. But it was the young women who held the story closest. Each year, on the night of the spring moon, they would gather beneath the willow. Simple offerings were laid among the roots. Small woven garlands, whispered wishes, tokens of protection. Some brought sprigs of wildflowers, others folded scraps of cloth or pieces of lace. A few came to ask for strength or courage or justice of their own. No one led these gatherings, no priest or elder declared it a rite. It had grown from the hearts of the people, as natural as the turning of the seasons. The willow was their place of warning, a place of remembrance. Here they honored Alara and all she had endured, and here they reminded themselves, the truth would always rise. And though the gown no longer moved, villagers swore that on certain nights, if you stood very still beneath the tree, you could hear soft footsteps in the grass. A rustle, a whisper, as if the dress still stirred, keeping watch. The cruel groom's family, broken by shame, had long since left the village. Alara's name, once silenced, was now spoken with respect. Her story was taught to every child, a reminder that power could live even in the voiceless and that justice, though slow, could be fierce. In time the village prospered. Kindness grew where cruelty had festered. And beneath the great willow the gown remained, silent, still, forever watching. It was no longer just a dress. It was a legend. A promise. A warning to those who might seek to harm, and a beacon to those in need of hope. And so, with each passing year, beneath the shade of the willow, the tale of the wedding dress that walked lived on. When dawn broke over the village, it found the people silent, weary from the long night. The events they had witnessed, the moving dress, the confessions torn from trembling lips, the sins dragged into the light, left them stunned, unsure of how to return to their ordinary lives. But change had already begun. The weight of injustice had lifted from their hearts. fear had turned to reverence. In the pale morning light, a quiet procession began to form at the edge of the village, where the path wound toward the willow grove. No one called for it, no bell was rung, no order was given. Yet the people came, elder and child, merchant and farmer, young and old alike, all drawn by a shared need to bear witness to what came next. They walked in silence, the path softened by dew. The whispers of the forest seemed gentler now, as though the trees themselves held their breath. When they reached the grove, they stopped as one. There, beneath the great willow, lay the gown. It was no longer a thing of terror. Gone was the restless movement, the eerie glow that had haunted the village for so many nights. The wedding dress rested in perfect stillness, its folds smoothed by unseen hands, its lace gleaming softly in the dawn light. The earth beneath it seemed undisturbed, as though welcoming this final rest. No voice broke the stillness, not at first. The villagers simply stood, heads bowed, absorbing the weight of what the gown represented. Justice at last had come. The truth had been heard. The dead had been honored. Then Elder Mira stepped forward. Her voice, though old, rang clear through the grove. "We bear witness," she said, raising her staff lightly above the gown. "To sorrow. To truth. To justice done. May your spirit rest, child. May the land remember." Others followed. Alara's old nurse wept openly, kneeling by the willow roots. "I failed you once, my sweet girl," she whispered. "But never again. You are not forgotten. You will be honored." From among the crowd, women came forward, some who had known Alara, others too young to have met her. Each left small offerings at the foot of the tree, garlands of wildflowers, sprigs of rosemary for remembrance, folded scraps of lace, tokens of love and sorrow. The gesture was quiet but full of meaning. The men bowed their heads. Many had been complicit in their silence, but now they stood with humility, acknowledging the wrongs that had festered in their midst. Throughout the day the grove remained a place of pilgrimage. More came, alone or in pairs, drawn by a need to pay respects. The air around the willow felt different now, no longer heavy with grief or fear but serene. The earth itself seemed to breathe easier. By nightfall, when the last of the villagers had returned to their homes, a gentle breeze stirred through the grove. The willow's long branches swayed, leaves whispering softly. And though no one saw it, those who came at dawn swore the gown had settled even more deeply into the earth, embraced by the roots of the ancient tree. The magic that had awakened with Alara's last breath was fading now, not from weakness but because its purpose was fulfilled. The threads that once danced with restless energy now glowed faintly, a quiet pulse of peace. In the days that followed, the village began to heal. The family of the cruel groom had fled, their name cursed and forgotten. No longer did villagers avoid the willow grove. Instead they came with reverence. The tale of the walking dress was told with respect, not fear. Children learned of Alara, not as a ghost to be feared, but as a spirit of justice, a symbol of strength and truth. Mothers reminded their daughters that no voice should be silenced, no wrong left unspoken. Fathers taught their sons that cruelty would not be hidden forever. And beneath the great willow the gown remained. It faded slowly, its fabric merging with earth and root, until only a shimmer remained beneath the leaves. The villagers said it was Alara's spirit watching over them still, a promise that the land itself would remember what had been done. As seasons turned and years passed, the grove grew lush and vibrant. Birds nested in the branches, wildflowers carpeted the ground. And on certain nights, beneath the full moon, villagers swore they heard soft footsteps in the grass or caught a fleeting glimpse of lace among the shadows. It was no longer a place of mourning. It had become a place of peace. A place where the dead could rest and the living could remember. And so, beneath the great willow, Alara's spirit found its peace, her story etched forever in the hearts of those who would never forget. Years slipped quietly by, but the memory of the night the dress had walked never faded from the hearts of the villagers. In every season, the great willow at the edge of the forest stood tall and strong, its branches reaching skyward as though in silent watch over the land. Its roots, deep and tangled, held the stories of the past in their embrace. Beneath its wide, sheltering canopy, a new legend grew. Children born after the events had not seen the haunted gown drift through the streets, nor had they heard the gasps of the crowd as the guilty confessed beneath the dress's gaze. But they heard the tale, told in hushed voices by mothers and fathers, by elders at twilight firesides. It was a story that needed no embroidery, no exaggeration. Truth gave it all the weight it required. It began with Alara, the young bride forced into a cruel fate, buried beneath the earth in her wedding dress. It continued with the dress itself, which rose through magic and grief to seek justice for its wearer. And it ended with a village forever changed, wiser, humbler, bound by a promise never again to turn a blind eye to wickedness. Over time the tale became more than history. It became a warning. For in every telling the heart of the story remained, the land remembers and justice will walk if called. The willow, once just another tree on the village's edge, grew sacred in the eyes of the people. They named it Bride's Rest and treated it with reverence. Each year, on the anniversary of that dark night, women of the village would gather there. Young girls came with their mothers or aunts, bringing small offerings, flowers woven into crowns, ribbons of silk, or folded notes tucked into the roots. Some left gifts in gratitude for justice done. Others sought strength or protection for the hardships they faced. It became known that the willow listened in its own quiet way. No one claimed to hear voices or see ghosts, but many swore that when they left their offerings beneath the branches, their hearts grew lighter and their burdens eased. Among the younger women, a quiet tradition arose. Before a marriage, they would visit the willow alone, placing a single flower beneath its branches. It was not for luck or beauty, it was a vow. A promise to speak if ever they faced cruelty. A reminder that silence had once buried a young woman alive, but truth had brought her spirit justice and peace. Through the years, the willow stood strong against storm and drought, as though protected by unseen forces. No axe touched it, no careless hands marred its bark. Hunters avoided the grove, for no game was ever taken there. Birds sang sweetly in its boughs and wildflowers grew thick at its roots. Travelers passing through the village would hear whispers of the tale. Some scoffed, dismissing it as mere superstition. But those who stayed longer, who walked the paths at dusk and listened to the soft wind in the trees, often came to believe there was truth in the old story. The elders who had stood witness to the dress's final moments grew old themselves. Before they passed, they made certain to pass the tale on, unchanged, to those who would remember. And so the story endured, woven into the very fabric of the village's life. As decades passed, small changes came to the village. New faces, new homes, new ways of life. But the legend of the walking dress remained constant. No festival was held without a moment of silence for Alara. No wedding proceeded without a visit to the willow. And in times of trouble, when the villagers doubted themselves or feared injustice, they remembered the tale of the bride whose spirit had refused to be silenced. In the deepest part of the night, when the wind stirred the willow's long branches, some said they still caught glimpses of white among the shadows, a fold of lace, a flash of silk. Whether true or not, no one dared disturb the grove. It was a place of peace and of memory. In this way, Alara's story lived on, not as a ghostly fear but as a lesson in courage and justice. And the village, once tainted by cruelty and silence, had become a place where truth was valued, where wrongs were not hidden, and where the land itself was known to remember. Thus, beneath the great willow, a new legend had been born, one that would never fade.